Hello, everyone. Life is not fair. You've invested in good content. You have that journalist in Baghdad that really gets, the high-profile interview. Very important, getting the content. You're covering, the football third league in Berlin, and you are the only one who can capture that, and you're driving the audience. You invest so that when users come to your page, that they're really engaged in the experience. You're not cluttering it with a lot of ads. Users will come again and again. Obviously, you've also invested in great ad tech so that you can monetize advertising very well. But it's not fair, because increasingly, when users come to your site with all that work that you've put in, they have already installed an ad blocker. And this has nothing to do with you. Because the number one reason, there are many reasons, but the number one reason why a user installs an ad blocker is that they have come to other sites unrelated to you where the ad experience is so annoying that they feel compelled to install an ad blocker, and then you suffer, and that is not fair. What I want to do is walk through the thinking of how we at Google think we can contribute to helping with this problem. And by helping with this problem, I really mean what Dilip referred to, this value exchange that you deserve. How can you get that back? Or how can you at least get a significant proportion of that back? And actually, let me start with explaining why I think we need to be careful not to be complacent, that even though, looking at some data, it may suggest that in the UK, ad blocking is kind of stabilizing. Let me use the following analogy to explain why we have to be careful. So I really like it to think about ad blocking of being in a boat that is filled with water. And it's filled with water. That's the number of ad blockers that you have. And why is it filled with water? It's because you have a hole, right? And the water is coming through there. And so you really have two problems to solve. The number one is you have to plug that hole. Because if that hole isn't plugged, all you shipping the water out of the boat is not going to help. It's a systematic problem. So what I think what we are seeing is why the water level doesn't seem to increase a lot is because you have become better of how to get the water out of the boat. But what have we actually done with stopping users to install ad blockers? And if we don't do that, there is a high risk that the amount of shipping will not be enough. And then secondly, in the front of the boat, we have the desktop hole. In the back of the boat, we have the mobile web hole. The mobile web hole is very small, but are we really all sure that this is not going to become bigger? So it's good to pay attention to that as well. So let me walk you. So there are kind of two aspects. We need to fix the hole in the boat, plug that one, and we need technology to get water out of the boat. And so let me start with the more complicated one. How do we actually plug the hole? And this is obviously an ecosystem problem because it doesn't happen in your site. It happens on sites that are at the fringes of the internet. So how is it possible to even kind of solve that? That's very difficult. It's not something that any of you can solve individually. It's not something that Google can solve. It's really an ecosystem problem. And so it makes sense to solve it as an ecosystem. Oh, actually, sorry. I wanted to mention another point why I think it is dangerous to be complacent. So this is, I couldn't find more recent data, but this is ad blocking within age groups. And you see what is worrying is that in the UK, the 18 to 24 segment, even though they pay for Spotify and they pay for Netflix, they are the highest users of ad blocking. This user group is going to grow. So I think it's another reason why when we think about the hole in the boat, I wouldn't be so sure that that hole isn't going to increase over time as these users age and new young users come in. But let's now come to the more positive part, like how do we actually solve this? So one thing that I'm genuinely proud that Google really brought the industry together by being one of the founding members of the Coalition for Better Advertising. And as you can see, here's just a snapshot of some of the members. And I put Oriel prominently because Tom will be on stage shortly. And it's really important to bring all these players together and also have it not just publishers, have advertisers as well. So here you have the World Federation of Advertisers. 80% of the global spend comes through members of World Federation of Advertisers. You have the largest two individual advertisers, Procter & Gamble, Unilever. It's very important that they are on board as well. And what this group has done is, based on probably one of the largest user-based panels, is to really data-driven figure out what ad experience is it that is driving ad blocking. And so this is a panel of more than 20,000 users. And you can imagine, in a coalition this size, to agree on anything is a bit of a nightmare. And so the data kind of needs to be absolutely bulletproof that, this big forum can decide, okay, we get it, the data is solid. This is the list of ad experiences that is really a core reason why users are installing ad blockers. So this report, this kind of is a negative standard, if you want, was released in March. So that's great news, right? So now all that needs to happen, everyone in the ecosystem needs just to look at the standard, see, am I violating it? Yes, no. If I am violating it, let's fix it. So what has happened? The truth is, not a lot has happened. So they put the standard out. We did some analysis, surveyed what has actually happened. We couldn't really see a big increase. So the first thing that we did is trying to help is to launch an ad experience report. So what the ad experience report is doing is it's taking the standard that's released by the coalition, and then we kind of do all the hard work, both by machines and manual reviews, doing an audit and looking at the sites so that every publisher who's interested can make it easier and can log in and see, am I violating, yes or no? And then here, so this is an actual screenshot. We say, if you violate a standard, what standard is it? We explain, what the standard is. We even have a video recording so that you can understand where it is, because it might be that you can't find it today, but you can see where it happened in the past, to try to make it as easy as possible for publishers to figure out, are they compliant or are they not compliant, and how could they fix it. So we have we rolled this out, I think, in May. We've evaluated more than 100,000 sites in Europe and North America. And we found two interesting things. The first one that we found, which we didn't expect, it is a relatively small number in percentage that is violating. Of course, in absolute numbers, you're still talking in the thousands, but in terms of percentage, it's very small. So these are sites that are systematically failing this standard. It's not just like an appearance here or there. They are really falling foul of it. And just to illustrate the percentage, it's always a bit difficult to figure out what does that mean. If I look at this room, we would need to have it roughly times 5, right? So if you just think 5 times this size, and then there would be one person in the room who would fall foul of the standard. So you see, it's a relatively small amount of publishers that are causing this leak. So that's the first interesting thing. The second thing that we found is that after releasing this report, things actually did happen. So roughly 25% of those sites engaged in some shape or form. So I'm not saying that they all fixed it, but before they didn't do anything. Now they're looking at it, and at least a significant number of those are fixing it as well. So it's kind of, it's one step in the right direction to plugging the hole. But if you're a bit more cynical, you would say, okay, 25%, well, what about the other 75%? And that's the dilemma that we feel is, you can put out standards, you can put out advice, you can do education. At the end of the day, if there is not some form of, let's say, kind of more convincing incentive, right? You will not get everyone in the ecosystem to adopt what we all know is the right thing to do. And this is kind of the background of why we have announced that we will do Chrome filtering, why we will do ad filtering in Chrome. So here's a kind of a screenshot of how it might look like. And just to call out a couple of things, as you can see from this screenshot, the user is always in control, right? So even if this site has a really annoying ad experience and is falling foul of the standard and is causing a lot of users to be so annoyed that they install an ad blocker, if the particular user on the site thinks this is great, they of course should have the right, to see the advertising, and we want to make it as easy as possible for them to make their choice. I think the second thing to notice is if you go back and think, who is actually going to be affected, on which publisher site that you see it, it's that 0.5% and a fraction of that. So it's kind of very limited and very targeted. Our goal, like what would be the ideal scenario for us? How would we measure success? The ideal scenario, I don't think we are going to get there, but the ideal scenario is that we would not have to show this a single time. The goal is not to have some fancy ad filtering. The goal is really to have this as an incentive. So ideally, so that's kind of what we're secretly hoping. Just by announcing that we will actually do it, we will get those small publishers to say, okay, fine, I get it. Now I'm incentivized enough to actually take a look and fix it, and we never have to do this. So let me come to the second bit. The standard by the coalition, the ad experience report, the Chrome filtering, all of this is to help plugging the hole in the boat. But plugging the hole in the boat, it's unrealistic that by doing this we have actually shipped any water out of the boat. Just because of all the standard and the Chrome filtering, I think it's unrealistic to expect that a user will say, oh, I've heard, all this amazing thing is happening, let me just uninstall my ad blocker. I don't think this is kind of realistic. So the second bit where we want to help, and obviously, we're not the only company working in this space, is to help publishers directly to get that water out of the boat. And what we have here is, so this is a program currently in beta. We call it funding choices, and the clue is kind of in the name. It's to give the user a choice and have a communication on the value exchange. And as we have heard before, there isn't kind of one single way how to do it. You might have a soft wall that you just tell the user, hey, there is a value exchange. Can you please contribute? But they can click it away and they can continue. Or you can make it, like a mixed wall, a metered wall that you get a bit of content, or you do a hard wall. And also what we do feel is important is to give user a choice to not see ads. This might be a little bit odd coming from Google, given that we make most of our money from advertising. But we do think it's more psychologically a good thing to give users a choice, because there are quite a number of users who go to a website and say, well, like all this tracking and advertising, and I hate ads, I don't want it. Just by giving them the choice, you will make them say, okay, I don't have to find a radical other technology that can get me around it and filter the ads. It is possible not to see ads. I just have to pay money for it. And then what happens in practice, they will quickly realize that actually it's a much better trade-off to see advertising. And coming back to the discussion this morning, absolutely there is a market to get, whether users don't want to see ads or you want to provide more value with subscription. I actually do think there is a market, but it's probably not more than 5-7%. Right? So the 95% of users, if you have a respectful dialogue, there's a good chance that you can get them to truly accept what an ad is. And so here, it's a beta. So take this number with a bit of caution. And they are also, of course, not the ultimate goal. But what we've seen in the beta is when you have really a hard wall, so saying you cannot see the content on the site unless you whitelist your ad blocker or you pay. By the way, almost no one pays. They all kind of whitelist. We see a 30% conversion. And 30% conversion is a meaningful way to get some of that revenue back that Dilip was showing you. It's not a small amount. Like if you, a number of the publishers that we work with, well, let me go back. Like, I think, it's plausible that in the UK, the country average is around 20% of ad blocking. It's plausible. It's very difficult to really get that accurate. Let's assume that's the case. There is, of course, not everyone is 20%. That's an average. Like some are below, some are above. The publishers that we work with, maybe they're more motivated, but they have around 40%. So these are the publishers that, at least some of them, have 40% that are in this program. So you take 40% times 30%, it's 12% of impressions recovered, it's potentially 12% more revenue. That is quite substantial. That is meaningful. That is meaningful revenue. And even those where you are kind of very, very soft, where you say, okay, you can still see the content, you just give us this opportunity to have a communication with you, and then you can click it away. Even there, we see up to 15% conversion. So definitely my message to you, whether you use this product or another product, it is definitely worth to experiment to reclaim some of that revenue. Let me wrap up with 3 things that would be my advice of what you could do. Is the first one, the ad experience report is available to anyone. It's part of Google's Search Console. I think it's good practice, unless you have done your own audit. Just go there, take a look. If there is an ad experience, an isolated here or there that is against the standard. And I know, you are premium publishers. You don't want to annoy your users. I know that you don't need any other incentive, and you will look at it and fix it if there's an odd occurrence. The second one that I do recommend is have that dialogue with your users. Really, there is money on the table that you're not getting that you deserve. This is your revenue. Do go in dialogue with your users to reclaim some of that revenue, whether it's with our product or with a competitor. And then lastly, if you think about the first problem of where the water comes into the boat, this is an ecosystem problem. So I think it would be great if you could also contribute at that level. And contribution could be, so for example, you can join the Coalition for Better Advertising. It's open to everyone. That would be a way. Or you can work in one of the committees, whether it's the IAB or other members, to work with trade associations representing publishers. Or even if you publicly kind of speak out, on Twitter, Facebook, etc., and endorse the work that they and their members do. I think that would be a helpful contribution. And with that, let me give it back to Dilip.
Thank you, Thomas.